travel isn't just about destinations, it's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place, whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
Warren Ingram, of course, a certified financial planner at Galileo Capital. I don't know if you have children. Maybe you've been through having children. Maybe you don't have children. You think it's never going to happen. Take it from me. You can find yourself looking after younger people just because that's just what life is like. Maybe a little bit more so, say, in this part of the world than some other parts of the world because the need is so great. But you are likely at some point to find yourself looking after someone who is younger than you. And Warren is focusing tonight on the best financial decisions. Warren, there's no way about it. The most important and the most expensive thing you'll ever have are children.
100%, Stephen, and I think the cost is both financial and emotional. From the point of view that I haven't met any parent yet that doesn't have some form of guilt about some trade-off that they have to make, whether it's time, money, any of those decisions. And always, when I observe those parents, they're always in some sort of state of shock, I guess, because they've got to give up something. And I think, money and emotions are always linked. And then you add children to that and you escalate all of those by many thousands of times, I think.
No, absolutely. All right, let's just start with the sort of cost of education. I mean, that's what most people focus on. I mean, for a long time, you don't have to feed children very much when they're very little. When they get to the teenage years, they'll eat you out of house and home. But I mean, schooling is expensive, and it almost doesn't matter which kind of schooling you choose.
I have a bit to do with some of South Africa's good government schools, and the cost of a good government school now is probably in the region of 35 to 45,000 a year. You look at South Africa's most expensive private school, and you're up at about 400,000 rand a year, and universities could cost you pretty close to 100,000 a year without accommodation. So no matter how we describe education, the word expensive is good, and then there could be some choice adjectives in front of that for parents who have to shell out that money. And I think especially for parents of younger children, one of the questions to ask them is, are you determined to send your child to a private school? It's almost always, the answer is always yes. I haven't really found, parents who would say no, quite happy to kind of find a lower priced school, and we're good with that. There's almost this default position. Yes, if we can afford it, if we can find a way, our kids are going to private school, and that's. Maybe the first conversation to have is that the best decision for the entirety of the family? And often the answer isn't always yes.
No, of course. Okay, so if you know you're going to have to fund your children's education, if you know that you're going to have to do this, where do you start? And I mean, you also then have to make a trade-off because if you're going to work to get that money, there'll be a trade-off about how much time you spend at home.
And I think that's the first point for me is when you're deciding, and I think it's interesting if you talk to let's say parents of a 2-year-old, they would say I can't even believe you're asking me the question. Of course I'm going to send my kids to private school. What do you mean? And to me those are, I'm not saying thoughtless decisions, because it's an incredibly caring, generous thing to do to give your children that education if you can afford it. However, there is an enormous cost that comes with a decision like that. And the first thing is, if it's going to put the entire the family under financial pressure, I would ask the question, who's benefiting really? If a child grows up in a family that's always desperately worried about money, they might not realize that they're a big portion of that stress when they're young, but as they get older, they will certainly realize that. And if they know that it's their private schooling that's putting the family under that kind of emotional pressure, just being married is hard. Just getting through the day, in a volatile country, in a volatile world is difficult. Add financial pressure on top of that, and then add to that you're a teenager and you realize you're a huge root cause of that. And I would suggest that for a lot of families, if they could redo that decision, they probably would, because I think taking a lot of financial pressure off everybody and allowing a bit of room to breathe, and certainly the opportunity to have some choices, I think parents need to consider that. It's not just a one-way decision. There are many ways of providing your children with a very good education that don't involve simply going down the route of whatever private school we can afford or the most expensive school we can afford. And I think parents don't really realize the other costs that they're going to carry, and I mean that in the emotional sense as well, until it's too late, until they're in it, and then it's almost impossible to get them to reverse course and consider any other kind of decision. So I would ask for people to think about that first. Is you can compensate nowadays for fairly average schooling if that's what happens. If you happen to be in a school in an area where the schools aren't great, the online resources available to parents and children nowadays are phenomenal, and always you can hire great resources online and in person to compensate for the potential gaps in the school's curriculum, and that's possibly a much cheaper way of providing personalized education to compensate for whatever weaknesses there are in the schooling system. That's not a bad call. That's not a bad decision, and probably creates a huge amount of breathing room for the family.
No, I can imagine that. I mean, so many of the issues around education and children are fundamental. And part of the thing that really shapes your childhood is where you live, where you actually grow up. Where you live is very important too.
For two reasons. So one, there are catchment areas for a lot of public schools. So in other words, the school will give preference and is almost obliged in a way to take children that live very close to the school. And so where you live as the parent, if you want to get your child into a good government school, and understand that if you live on the doorstep of the school, it does help you a lot.
We seem to have lost Warren Ingram there on that line. Do apologize for that. We were talking to him, of course. He is the co-founder of Galileo Capital. We'll get Warren Ingram back for you in just a moment. There's a lot, of course, to look at there. And it's a fascinating conversation, actually, about where you live and how you manage education. Your calls for Warren as well on 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567. Warren back with us. Now, Warren, you were talking about why where you live is so important.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Stephen, the catchment area of a school does dictate for example property prices very often, and so if you're choosing to live far from a school that you want to get your child into, there is a very good chance that school won't accommodate you, and so if there is a specific school, you need to choose a property very close to that school. And if property prices in that area are incredibly high, it means you need to make a very conscious decision to say, either we're going to try and stay in a bigger home, and that might be out of the budget, or we're going to make a change again. We're going to choose a small home very close to the school and make sure that that we trade off financially in that way. We don't put the family under huge pressure by trying to provide a big property. We'll use public spaces where we can for school fields and sports fields and getting out, and for the rest we'll make do with what we've got. It's something to consider. And the other alternative is people who say we're staying in our dream home. The fact that it's 45-minute drive from school is not a problem. We'll get by. However, if you think about the practicalities of that, it means that everybody's in a car for an hour and a half a day at best, if there's no traffic and no load shedding and no traffic lights gone and all those things. And kids who play sport and then forget school bags, etc., it creates huge stress. And so everybody's tired all the time, and you end up enjoying the house for Saturday afternoon, because Saturday there'll be sport in the mornings, and Sunday. So, make those choices very, very carefully, and I think not so emotionally. Try to understand that the time is really your enemy in a situation like this. You've got to give yourself and your family as much time together, and not when you're all fighting with each other in the car because you're cranky about the traffic.
No, of course. Also, we mustn't forget this. A good education doesn't just come from school or from the tertiary institution. A lot of it comes from your home.
I can't believe the power of teaching children to read. If you look at the studies and you see the impact of teaching children to read and to understand and read for meaning at a very young age, if you look at what happens to their ability to learn later in life and their academic and career success, the early readers, and I'm not saying people that are gifted children, just children that were taught to read at a young age, that they have a huge advantage over children who weren't, and so. Understanding that the first few years of your child's life are generally not at a school, and so spending time firstly reading to your children, that's pretty low cost, almost free, and then spending time with them while they read. That could be the thing that sets your child's educational career on the right path, and that's not expensive to do. The age of by the age of 5 to 7, somewhere around there, a lot of the development for a child's ability to learn is locked in already, and you can make a huge impact as a parent on your child. So thinking that, well, I'm not going to put too much effort in, I'm not going to worry too much about this stuff, I'm going to send them to a good school and the teacher will take care of it. That's not true. There are many kids that have come through terrible schooling systems that have done phenomenally well, and many kids that have been given the best schooling ever that have made no success of their lives in any aspect. So understanding you have a huge role to play in giving your child the educational leg up, and don't think that a school is the difference. That it's not. It's actually the parents that make a huge difference in the situation.
There's a question that comes from Megan talking a little bit about this, and she says, "Hi, I'm getting divorced. My husband wants to give me the house so I can raise the children. He wants to keep our investments, which are the same value as the house. I don't earn a big salary because I work half days, so I can look after the children in the afternoon. Is it a good idea to take the house?" So as I understand this, he wants to keep the investments. He says they're the same value of the house, and she would get the house, but she's only working half days. Warren, is that a little bit difficult? A little bit dangerous, maybe?
Yeah, and I can't tell you how often a situation like this repeats itself. There are a couple of issues here. So one of them is that Megan's taken the decision to kind of step back in her career. So she's compromised her career for the children. Now she's getting divorced. Her husband hasn't compromised his career, so his earning ability is significantly higher, and he's working full time, and so. Taking the house might sound like a good idea because you're giving your children stability. However, what you're also doing is taking on the burden of maintaining a property, and it's expensive to maintain a larger house. And if you're only doing that on a salary that's generated from a half-day job, I don't think that's a good deal at all. I mean, if I were in Megan's situation, I would actually flip it on its head and say, I'll take the portfolio and I'll go and rent myself a small house that's just big enough for myself and the kids, and you can keep the big house, thank you very much, and I'll keep adding to the investments. You can't live off a house, you can't eat a house. So having investments that can pay you an income stream is much more valuable to someone who's got a compromised salary than a big house, which is going to cost you a lot in terms of rates, taxes, and then maintenance, etc. So I think a lot of the time, people in a position like this get trapped by the allure of the house, and it's a very expensive thing to sell a house, especially if you haven't had the money to maintain it after a few years.
I mean, and also, I mean, you've got to be very aware if an offer looks very tempting, you've got to actually, particularly, I'm afraid to say, in the context of a separation or a divorce, you've actually got to be quite cynical about it. You've got to have someone really look at it very closely.
And maybe just to jump to the pre-marriage contracts that people sign, one of the things I'd be saying is before we get married, we're going to have a conversation about whose career takes a back seat when we decide to have children. If we decide to have children and we kind of deciding that the wife, for example, is going to take a back seat, then if we get divorced, my feeling is that the wife should be entitled to 60 or 65% of the marital assets on divorce because her career is compromised. No matter what, she's compromised. Even if she gets back into the workspace later, she's had a few years of either half day or no work, and that will count against her, unfortunately, in a society like ours. So I think just be careful going into the contract that you sign it carefully. And if you're at the stage now where you're in divorce, don't accept the offer of 50-50 because your earning ability is going to be compromised for a long time. And so I think divorce courts should be rewarding the partner, the parent who's taken the back seat to look after the children, and the other parent can make it up in work because that's the privilege they've got now, is they've got the earning ability.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And saving for education, I mean, I presume this is something you want to do in stages. You want to do it very carefully.
So if you've got very young children, the truth is that you've got very few years before their junior school or their preschooling costs will start. And so I think, what you should be saving for potentially is their high school and university costs. Because, if you've got a child that's 2 years old, let's say, that means, you've probably got around 10 or 11 years to save before high school fees kick in. And then a bit longer, another 5 years, hopefully only 5 years until university starts. And that's a long time, which means you can set aside money and put it into, either a general equity unit trust or an exchange traded fund that invests in the stock market to give yourself the best chance of letting that capital grow as much as possible before you need it. And generally, high school and university will be a bit more expensive than the preschool and junior school. I'm not saying that's always the case. Some preschools are really expensive, but those are costs you should probably try and carry from your salary, and then set aside the capital and let it grow, which hopefully means that over a decade of savings, you don't have to, if it's going to cost you, let's say it's 100,000 rand for university every year, you don't have to have saved 100,000. You could, have hopefully saved 20 or 30,000 and let the capital grow. So the cash flow impact on you is a bit less by starting earlier. And I think, don't worry too much about the early stages. Do what you can afford and then let the capital accumulate so that you can give your child the best education that you can afford with the capital you've raised.
I mean, so much about this is all about planning. And the one thing that you do know about children is you kind of know when you're going to need the money. So actually, you should be able to do it quite carefully.
And I think nowadays it's, we all know education's expensive. We all know parents are under financial pressure. So when your children are young, one of the things to do is start a school fund and tell your friends and family who want to give you gifts, why don't you contribute to their school fund? Everybody wants to feel part of raising children and contributing to their educational success. So it's not something that would be strange to ask people to do that instead of buying a gift, which is, going to be thrown away or given away in 6 months or a year. And to me, that the gifts are so expensive nowadays that giving education and allowing that capital to grow is such a phenomenal present to give, and it doesn't matter what the amount is. Anything that helps the parents contribute to their savings, to me, is a mighty gift for everyone concerned.
Warren Ingram, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. A certified financial planner and, of course, co-founder of Galileo Capital. You might want to get the podcast of this, send it to people who you think might need it. The price, the cost, the way to invest to bring up children.